am your moderator for today's discussion. This evening we have two very accomplished speakers. So I'll start off with Benjamin Fabre, the co-founder and CEO of DataDome. Leveraging his deep expertise as a technologist and as an entrepreneur, Benjamin set out to build a transparent and easy-to-deploy anti-bot solution that is a true force multiplier for IT security teams to preserve user experience. Benjamin, everyone. Second up, we have Maxime Lamotte-Brossard, co-founder and CEO of LimaCharlie, a public cloud platform for security operations capabilities. He has an extensive background in security, previously working at the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, we're Canadian, and an early contributor at CrowdStrike and Google X. That is Maxime. And finally, our team, Imagining Forward, we curate progressive conversations around future frontiers. So today's topic, security in space. You can expect a discourse around the evolution of security, risks resulting from modern innovation. So let's get started. Take a seat. And we will reserve audience questions for the end, so please bring your most curious minds tonight. Thank you. This is a softball, I do promise. The S&P Kensho Cybersecurity Index is down 5% year to date, indicating the cyber sector has not been a beneficiary of the 11.4% AI-led rally of 2024 markets. Furthermore, second quarter earnings indicate a pullback in cyber spend at a time when AI is enabling malicious threat actors. So, Benjamin, how would you break down the present 2024 security landscape?
Yeah, so that's exactly what we see in the market now. So years after years, when the tech industry was booming, we've seen enterprise companies adding layers and layers of securities, adding multiple vendors in their stack, and seeing that the security as sort of insurance. You want to add more to be safe in the future. But when the economy starts to be more complex, when enterprise want to save on their spend and their cost, that's the moment when they start to say, well, I have deployed dozens of solutions, but I don't see the value on some of them or most of them. So that's the moment when we are. We can see that the finance start to challenge the security team, the tech team, to make sure they benefit from all the investment they've done in the past. And they will turn to, we are looking as for insurance to, we are looking for investment and we need a return on investment. So they take every single line of their budget, including the cybersecurity budget. That's the new thing we've seen in 2024. And they ask for return on investment. So that's what we've done this year, working with our customers, explaining the ROI of their investment, why they need to keep investing in solutions to protect their stack. And it really depends on the bucket where you fall in. If you are a sort of insurance security solution, that means you prevent something that might happen one day in the future with a very low risk level, then your budget might be completely vanished. If you are an active security solution that prevents every single day malicious attacks, and you can prove that value, sort of bucket where we fall at DataDome, then it's pretty easy to explain and to prove the value and to make sure that the budget will remain here this quarter, but also in 2024.
Absolutely, thank you. Maxim, do you push back, or how do you characterize the security sector?
Yeah, no, I would say yes, and which is that there's another dynamic, I think, that also partially explains what we're seeing in that contraction, which is, so cybersecurity has sort of an acronym problem, right? Which is every year, every couple of years, there's kind of more new categories of products that come out, and they get an acronym, and all of the the analysts, vendors kind of put their stamp on the market and kind of call it a new category, and that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. There's new ways to do cybersecurity, and it's expanding all the time. However, I think what we're seeing now is also that it's not infinite. Essentially, we're seeing that a lot of companies, like you're describing, see this pressure, and the way that they're responding to that pressure is partially at what can we eliminate, but also I'm a programmer, I'm a developer by background, so for me it's like garbage collection. It's saying like, hey, we have these 100 acronyms. You know what? 60 of those, it turns out they're really not that cutting edge anymore. And so is there a way that we can kind of collapse those into a couple less vendors, a couple less products, and save money? So I think in my mind it's kind of a mix of both of those dynamics that is coming right now. And I think the latter one that I mentioned is actually a really a positive thing. It's a hard pressure on the industry, but I think it's also something that's going to make the industry a lot more resilient in the future, because it forces us to, it forces us to be critical about what we're doing, not just like, oh yeah, new company, new startup, new acronym, sell. It's good if you're starting a company, but it's not really the greatest if you're talking about the long-term maturity of an industry.
Perfect. So in the same line as being critical of ourselves, this question came up in conversations a couple days ago. Who is in charge of space? Who will set laws on security measures affecting non-sovereign satellites, space infrastructure? So, Maxime, I'll start with you this time. How important is the collaboration of cybersecurity companies with, say, sovereigns, the public, regulatory bodies, and corporate America around policies on emerging technology?
That's a good question. It's a big question. I guess the first thing I would say is that it's very clearly an evolving story, right? I'm really going to pick on space because I think there's so many limitations. It's such a weird, harsh environment.
Absolutely.
So in space, if you look back at, let's say, in the 60s, right? Who launched a CubeSat in the 60s? Like nobody, right? That's insane. Only nation states could possibly go and operate in that space. Obviously, that's something that's drastically changing. And I do pretty firmly believe that we're at the very beginning of that. Mm-hmm. So the story of who's responsible in general for different aspects, the reality is that if you look forward in 10 years, it's not going to be a single type of entity. Mm-hmm. To me, that's pretty clear. As we get more and more private sector companies putting things up there, but also as we go back to the moon. And we need private sector to go and help in so many ways to make that mission possible. So, is the cooperation, I guess, between the private sector and cybersecurity, particularly, and all of the initiatives in space? I think yes, they're absolutely critical. I would also say, and maybe that's a slightly more controversial statement, it's also an opportunity for cybersecurity and for decision makers of kind of all of those stratas, those layers, to hit a little bit of a reset button on cybersecurity. Cybersecurity has become a big industry, and it's in many cases, not all, but in many cases, it's become a big industry first, and an industry doing things to protect people second.
Right.
And that's kind of fine, here we're all on Earth and it's just, I don't know, Facebook going down, it's like, it sucks. But if we're talking about like, hey, we're going to put people on the moon, we're going to have all kinds of satellite, like all these things up there, it's super critical that we hit that reset button and we go back to the fundamentals for cybersecurity.
Right. Thank you. Well, Benjamin, what are your views on the collaboration and the importance of cybersecurity being a major voice?
Yeah, so I think one of the changes we've seen also lately is that now, a couple of years ago, it was really costly to create very massive, sophisticated attacks. So that was only for state attacks because that requires so much money that, no private group or small attackers could get that amount of money. But now we've seen major changes because of the rise of cloud providers, because of the rise of technologies, and basically any newbie can start a massive attack just pressing one button for a couple of dollars. So that means the cost of an attack decreased significantly. And that put pressure on the defense side. You are not just fighting a foreign government or a massive group of attacker. You are facing any newbie in his room that with a couple of dollars can launch massive attack going through millions of IP addresses. Mm-hmm. And when we see the current political situation with the upcoming presidential elections, etc., we have at DataDome, we protect some of the largest medias in the US, the mainstream medias. They want to make sure that they are protected against those sort of attacks, because influence fraud in this current situation is something massive that can generate a lot of impact for the different governments. And that, again, can be started with a couple of dollars. You can click on the button and you can send a massive volume of fake account creation on large medias to create millions of fake comments on social networks, on medias, to try to influence the opinion of dozens of millions of people that will vote for the presidential election. Yeah. And that's something that requires to be very careful because those medias, those digital businesses can be massively impacted by those attacks.
Definitely. So switching gears to a phenomenon that has taken our current times by storm. To preface the next question, I will start. George Orwell, in his famed work 1984, plays on a recurring theme of 360 degrees surveillance. In a nutshell, Orwell imagined the year 1984 as a sci-fi dystopia where the eye surmounts your living presence 24/7, 365. In 2024, LLMs and Gen AI are ubiquitous, ranging from virtual assistants like Siri and Alexa to search engines, and are structurally pivotal to the back end of financials, utilities, and supply chains. So I ruminate. Is AI the modern I? LLMs face the risk of prompt injection or breach of personal data. In the RSA conference last week, a plethora of AI security companies unveiled products focused on data confidentiality, protecting corporate data and sovereign data from critical threats. While AI advancements are integral for cybersecurity solutions, is AI truly enough against this Orwellian eye? So, Benjamin, what is your perspective on the need for human expertise and oversight in the world of AI?
Well, that's also a vast topic. So I think AI is super helpful, but on both sides of the battlefront. So what we see on the attacker side is that AI LLMs can be used to create massive volume of content that sounds really legitimate. So, if we take the example of phishing, like 3 years ago, training about phishing was be careful if the text is not clear, if it includes mistake, or if the tone is not right, etc. Now with LLMs, phishing messages are perfect. Right. They will know exactly what you expect, what's the tone, how are you used to discuss with this person, what's the context, etc. And we can apply that to any single attack. At scale, you can create millions of perfect content with the right tone that sounds very legitimate. And that's something that any human can detect. You cannot split a legitimate message compared to an illegitimate message just looking at it. We can see also that AI now is used to pass CAPTCHA. CAPTCHA are not efficient anymore. Any AI can pass CAPTCHA better than any human, and right. It's so painful for us human, right? Yes. So it's a sort of lost battle. Yeah, exactly. Red light, etc. So I think on the attack side, it's really dangerous, right. Of course. But the good side is on our side. The good side, on the defense side, it's also a very powerful tool, a powerful weapon. Because we can make decisions based on a massive volume of signals in a couple of milliseconds. Right. That's something that cannot be done without using machine learning or AI. And also we can learn from feedback loops to train and update those models in real time. What we've done at DataDome is that we've started to collect billions of signals to understand what is a legitimate behavior on a website. And if we look at the pillars on both sides, I think there are three major pillars. The first one is engineer. You want to have the best engineer. But on this topic, I mean, attackers, they also have the best engineer. Right. So it's on par. Yeah. The second topic is the machine learning algorithm or the AI tool that we will use. I mean, on both sides, they will have the same technology. So on par again. Where defense can be better, it's as the data. We have more data on our side than attackers. We know what is the legitimate behavior. We know how humans interact with a website or a mobile app. We know what is good, what is not good. Right. An attacker, they can just guess. So it's key to protect the data because that's how we can train models and that's how we can defeat attackers.
Right. Sure. Maxim, what makes the human element indispensable in a paradigm of AI cybersecurity?
So I'll start by kind of making a little bit of a dichotomy in this, which is we're talking a lot about AI, and I think most people, when they talk about AI these days, they're really talking about LLMs.
Yes.
But really, there's kind of a really hard, powerful science behind this, which is machine learning and statistical analysis and lots of amazing things that are behind this. And those are extremely powerful. There are sciences that may not look the sexiest right now, kind of in the public space, but in my opinion, are probably going to be even more impactful in the long term, because they allow things. They allow for automation and analysis, exactly like you mentioned, right? Like millions of data points. It's probably not an LLM that's looking at that. So that aspect is I just wanted to kind of put it to the side. Yeah. So around the LLM, LLMs are very interesting. I think what I'll pick the other side of what you were talking about, not against it, but just the other aspect, which is the idea of how LLMs are attacked. Right. And LLMs can be attacked, right? And you mentioned prompt injection, and it's kind of a weird thing. I'll be honest. I've started security. I was in 2007. Prompt injection is nearly exactly the same thing as SQL injection. And back in 2007, that was already a really old type of attack, right? So I do find it really interesting that we're seeing these super basic attacks happen again. And the reason for this, or part of that reason, is that right now everybody's sprinting with the LLMs, right? They've got like the LLM torch and they're just going furiously forward without kind of looking back about how it can be secured. Right. And honestly, that's okay. I think it's okay. Not that bad things won't happen. Bad things will absolutely happen. But we need to drive innovation, because at the end of the day, if we had taken the approach of saying, hey, no, nothing bad can happen with LLMs, we would still be, I don't know, talking to Siri, right? Like sorry, Apple burn or something. So back to that kind of human aspect, I think what will be happening in the next few years is we're going to realize all of the ways that LLMs can be attacked. Most of them, we have no clue what they are right now. And that's the right order to do things, right? The idea that somehow, we need all this legislation today that kind of plans ahead of time is just, to me, it's like, I don't know, in 1910 saying like, what nuclear, anti-proliferation laws do we need? It's like, nobody has any clue about any of that stuff, and whatever we think it is, it's probably not going to be it. Okay. But it's going to be critical. Just maybe not now.
So if it's critical and we still don't have a clue about it, using this question as a follow-up, if you were the CEOs, if you were leading OpenAI, Anthropic, Perplexity, there's so many, take your pick, what would be, as a founder, as a leader, your single most security focus today as leader of those companies? Benjamin?
You first.
I think making sure that my tool is not used at large scale to run massive attack. So I think prompt injection, I agree. To me, it's fine. I mean, the risk is mostly on their side rather than on the rest of the world side. So I mean, it's not something that is, for me, the highest priority. But on the other side, making sure that the tool is not abused in order to run massive attacks at scale. Again, I might say that because that's what I'm seeing every single day as a company that protects businesses against large-scale attacks. That's probably where I would put my focus. And the second one is, one thing that we help our customers to prevent is the abuse of all those models, because that costs a lot. Most of our customers use LLMs to provide their business. And when some attackers can see that they can abuse that and run massive volume of requests, that can cost a lot to our customers. So we want to make sure that when they provide those services, it's only being used by their legitimate customer and not by attackers running some bots in order to run millions of queries that can cost a fortune. Right. And actually, a significant part of our growth is coming from that. They have abused, attackers that abuse the APIs and run those massive volume of requests. And they can save a lot by cutting all those bad traffic.
Sure. Maxime, your take.
I like where you're going. I tend to agree. What those companies have, right, we call them like AI companies. Right. But if you broaden your scope a little bit, I'm not diminishing the value of like the AIs and the algorithms and all of that, but there's sort of another thing that's in the sphere of those companies that they have, which is very difficult to get to, and that's compute. Right. And that is absolutely insane amounts of compute. So I think I would sort of take the same approach around abuse that you're mentioning, in terms of like where should the security focus be, and it would be around the idea around preventing their platform and their compute from being used directly to perform abuse for things like like the elections or attacking various types of companies in different ways. Right. Because when you remove that, I think there's very little that those companies can truly do, right? That's kind of that's the problem with software, right? At the end of the day, you got the software, it's out in the wild, people will be able to replicate it at some point. It's just a lot harder to do a copy on a GPU.
Yeah. Well, I love that you bring out compute power. It brilliantly leads into my next question. So my first technology interaction was my father's IBM desktop running DOS with an Intel x86 processor. I am happy to inform I've since upgraded. I have a Mac running a M3 processor. The 90s faced viruses, worm attacks, in juxtaposition to today's sophisticated and targeted APTs, ransomware, IoT, cloud attack vectors. NVIDIA's latest product, the H200, touts almost 2 times the memory and 1.5 times the bandwidth than its predecessor. Magnanimously more than my Intel x86 chip. Advanced GPUs, unprecedented compute power, parallelism, and memory capabilities. This power portends to the proliferation of malicious attacks for financial gains, for espionage, and for cyber warfare. So, Maxime, to go back to your point, how are you as CEOs adapting your business models, your strategies, and your product roadmaps to the evolving threat landscape led by these seismic tech advancements?
I believe that the biggest impact that something like that has is around the limitations, right? So when you're looking at kind of the dynamic between attackers and defenders, there's technologies, there's types of attacks, all that's fine. But I think the core way that you kind of, at the end of the day, have to look at it is a question of ROI, right? How much money does the attacker have to spend in order to make $1, against a defender, and how much, the opposite, right? If I spend $1 as a defender, how much do I avoid? The proliferation of compute that is wildly available, even if you ignore like the GPUs, right? And you're talking like, hey, AWS exists and GCP exists. That is fundamentally changing that cost, and so that dynamic between defenders and attackers. in fact, previously you were talking about CAPTCHAs, and that is a beautiful example, right? They were always solvable. This wasn't, I mean, paraphrasing here, but like this is not necessarily something that's like incredibly new. What's new is the ability for some random person to hit an AWS data center with a stolen credit card and get 1,000 CPUs or GPUs and compute through it. So I think it's going to change a lot of those equations where it's not so much that the technology is different or the end goal is different. Crime is crime, and spying is spying. It's been like that for thousands of years. But the ways that become profitable, that's where the biggest change is going to be.
Definitely. Benjamin?
100% aligned. It's a question about ROI, the cost of an attack, the cost of the defense, and the landscape evolve every single day. When I started the company, it was all about blocking attacks coming from a couple of servers stored somewhere on the planet, blocking some IP addresses. That was pretty much it. And then with the cloud providers, we've seen attacks coming from all around the world, popping from thousands of IP addresses. And now attacks are coming from residential IP addresses because as we speak now, we all have in our pocket a mobile phone that is doing nothing, or maybe one of the apps on your mobile phone is actually being used to use your device as a proxy. And while we speak, you might be actually used as a proxy to attack one of the largest media in the US, retailer, or digital or financial businesses. So that means attackers can, again, pressing just one button, use millions of mobile devices that are infected or have a compromised mobile application, or using a botnet with IoT infected in the US and use all this power compute for free, or almost free. Coming back to the ROI question, right? If you can have a massive volume of compute for free, that means the cost of an attack is super low. So our goal is to increase the cost of attacks to reduce the risk that it's being positive ROI for attackers. So how do we do that? We make sure that it's very expensive to run this attack by being able to detect that it's coming from residential proxy and infected devices and to block that. So that means attacks are more costly and then attackers will just stop. They are just here for business. If there is no ROI, there are no more attacks.
Great. So this Saturday, Boeing planned a Starliner launch its first crewed space flight. The same weekend, SpaceX launched 23 Starlink broadband satellites into orbit, the 40th liftoff of 2024. So could you speak to how AI-generated automation may expose services like telecom, which is a critical infrastructure, to tailored and full-scale malware attacks? What would be the solution in this case?
The solution, yeah.
Don't hate me.
Oh man, the solution. I mean, that's a hard one. I'll go kind of take this approach. So,
Sure.
Critical infrastructure, right? ISPs and power companies are actually the parts of our society that use, let's call them computers, just generalize, that are the slowest moving, like by far.
Right.
Way by far. Thankfully, in general, they're also simple, not as in, hey, the power grid's a simple thing, but more as in, probably nobody needs to browse Facebook from like a big power generator,
Hope
right? So that kind of limits a lot, in a way, the impact that some of those new technologies can have.
Okay.
Where that doesn't hold true is probably from the oldest angle of them all, which is the human angle.
Right.
And so, when we're talking about phishing, or, we're talking about all kinds of ways that humans can be convinced to do things is really what it comes down to. Now we're going back to the technologies of LLMs and to the large scale amount of those attacks that can be done very cheaply, where in the past, right, as a human, you sort of had a couple of choices, right? If I'm trying to get somebody to click on a malicious thing in a power plant somewhere, I had a couple options. So one is I could start sending emails, and I had to be a human typing at the keyboard to really be able to convince the person at the other end.
Right.
So that's one way, and that's when, like, okay, the ROI is pretty directly kicking in. The other possibility was, and let's not discount it, is I could just show up at the place and with a sack full of cash, and you'd be shocked at the effectiveness of that. Now the problem is, well, your ROI is very different, because now the cost of that is, like, you might go to jail very, very real, in a real way. So what we're introducing now with the LLMs is kind of this weird middle ground where I can say, you know what, I'm going to have 100,000 people write really, 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 really convincing stuff remotely and send that across entire companies. And, at some point, somewhere, I'm going to get somebody to, click into the thing.
Right. Benjamin,
Yeah,
anything to add?
yeah, no, 100%. I think the attack surface of those companies is lower than most of the, I would say, the modern companies. What is interesting is, so when we talk with our customers, sometimes the risk is coming from the fact that any developer in an organization, modern organization,
right.
can kick off an EC2 instance with an API that is not secure, because it's just a POC, and then everyone forget about this POC, and we have a major weakness in the customer infrastructure. That's not possible in a power plant.
Or less, anyway.
Yeah, or probably less. So you're right, it's coming back to human. And again, with LLMs, you can do things at scale. In the past, you had to really tailor-made your attack. I want to target this power plant, and I know all employees, and I will craft a message by hand for one person, and I put all my bet on just one person. With LLMs, you can do that at scale. You can create an automation where you will send millions of emails on every single power plant on the planet, and if just 0.01% just click on the email, then boom, you're in. So that changed completely the cost of those attacks and the way we have to train the team and to make sure that there are no weaknesses in the organization, both technical weaknesses, but also human weaknesses.
Great. Well, while the democratization of Gen AI promises to accelerate innovation, there are also concerns of misuse. Several misuses have been mentioned. So how does the investment in Gen AI tools across industries, not just our mission-critical utilities and energy, but across all industries, with, say, a tool like Copilot, exacerbate security complications for a different type of infrastructure, our cloud and data infrastructure? So what would be the complications that arise from Gen AI in cloud and data? Maxie?
Sure. I mean, it's really a continuation of what we were just talking about, and I think it's sort of the exact other end of the mirror, that spectrum, right? If you're talking about a cloud company, it's probably as connected and as open as you can possibly imagine.
Absolutely.
So the types of attacks that those are going to enable, you know what? I think if you're still focusing around the LLM, it's really still the human, right? Again, LLMs, it's in the name, right? It's about the language. Mm-hmm. So those types of attacks, I think, still fairly similar. It probably just with a much higher like percentage of hit rate.
So how would you classify the risks across actors? It could be infrastructure, workflows, or the human element. From what it seems that you both are mentioning, it seems to be asymmetric towards the human element across all infrastructure, utilities or cloud. Is that correct in my understanding?
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? Okay. We're the problem, unfortunately. So Benjamin, how would you perceive cloud and data infrastructure security, especially with the advent of modern technology?
Yeah, so I think everything is about, first, having a proper assessment of all your infrastructure, all your stack. What we see is that now our customers, they are using very large set of application cloud providers, and they have first a hard time to at least understand exactly where their stack is deployed.
Right.
They have engineers that say, well, I want to go all GCP, and then 2 years later they will say, oh no, I want to do all AWS, and then at the end of the day they have GCP, AWS, Azure, on-prem, and have all their data that are stored in multiple places. So that means the level of exposure increase massively years after years. And on top of that, you add APIs. So that means they have dozens of APIs. Sometimes they have no ideas about the volume of APIs they have. Right. And the level of risk increase and increase. And I will go on the positive side of LLMs and AI. Today, it's a human cannot properly assess how much a company is exposed. But if they use AI, and if we use LLMs, we can see now that there are tools that can do this assessment in real time to discover all the APIs that are being published, all the weaknesses in the code that is currently in production, etc. So we can also see the bright side of AI, that it helps companies and enterprises to have in real time. Because the problem is when you do a pen test or when you do an assessment, it's just like once a year, and it's way too rare in order to be efficient. So you have to do that in real time, because if you create weaknesses in production, you will be attacked immediately. You cannot wait for the next assessment in 12 months in front of you. So when you are able to have in your delivery process AI analyzing all the code, all the APIs, all the infrastructure that is being deployed, you can prevent that from happening. So I think that's the good positive part of AI, and that's how we can increase the security of our stack and the business of our customers.
Really. It's been fascinating to hear you both agree on certain things. So the floor is yours. What is the most exciting work of yours in the pipeline? So should we start with you?
Sure. So we're taking a drastically kind of different take on a lot of cybersecurity. So, the statement that we're effectively making is that cybersecurity as an industry is maturing a lot, right? We're talking about so many different aspects, and we as an industry are trying to have this credibility of saying, hey, we know what we're doing. It's not just people putting VC money and stuff and flipping them after a while, and now we have hundreds of acronyms. How do we really think about cybersecurity? And for the next 50 years, how do we try to do this properly? How do we become a science? Right now, not in all cases, but it really isn't a science. Right. So what we're trying to do is we're kind of trying to set the first step in that direction. And that is to say, look, there's another industry that figured out a lot of this, and that is the IT industry. Cloud providers have figured out a lot of this in the sense that people specialize in IT, right? People build solutions that are very innovative. And if I do an AI company today, right, here's what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to go and build my own data center and build my own web servers and build like all this crazy stuff. But that's exactly what cybersecurity is doing. Cybersecurity is those huge companies that have raised a lot of money, that have built a lot of things. They are completely opaque widgets that we sell, and it's not that they're not good. That's not it at all. An incredible amount of good products in cybersecurity. The thing is, if you had to send a rocket into space, right? How would you feel about the rocket company like telling you or NASA, oh, I have the best rocket? It's like, well, what do you mean, right? What are the parameters? How does it behave in different weather? And like, oh no, we're the best. We just launched the best. It's like, that's not an answer. That's not a mature answer to a set of problems. So we're building a cloud provider for cybersecurity specifically so that we can build the boring, important parts of cybersecurity that have been done for a long time so that people that want to innovate can innovate using what we do and be a net accelerator of innovation in the industry and not an inhibitor.
That's fantastic. Best of luck. How about you, Benjamin? What is in the works for DataDome?
Yeah, so what we've done is start by protecting our customers against automated threats. So like credential stuffing, DDoS layer 7, scraping, scalping. There are dozens of threats related to the bot traffic. And what we've done more recently is listening our customers saying, well, you are doing great on the bot space. Now we have an efficient way to protect our websites, our APIs against automated threats, but we want to go beyond that. And we can see that now attackers are using human in complement of bots. So we have started to release a fraud prevention solution to protect our customers not only against automated threats, but against any sort of fraud that can be done either by bots or by human or by a combination of both. Because sometimes humans are less expensive than bots. Right. So that's the moment when you want to raise the bar on both sides. And if we look at the trend on the market, we now hear some analysts saying that they see that the cybersecurity market and the fraud market might, in the future, merge together. And I believe in that. And what you said earlier is that cybersecurity getting more mature. And I think it means cybersecurity be able to prove the value they bring to their customers. And I think that's going in the same trend, which is be more ROI approach, be more business-centric. What do these tools help? Why this tool is necessary in order to secure the business and to grow the revenue or to reduce the cost. And that's where we see the future going with this merge of the two big markets. And that means internally, you can talk about governance, etc. But every silo in companies will bring, of course, risk because the ball will fall in between.
Right. Well, okay, this is the final question for tonight, and it might be the hardest one, since you have both been so agreeable with each other thus far.
Oops.
The question is, I've worded from Peter Thiel, when you consider the future 10 years from now, what is the one non-consensus, might I stress, non-consensus way you feel the world will be different?
How many time do we have?
30 seconds. Maxime, do you want to take this?
God. Again, I think it's an extension of what I'm saying, which is in the future, so it sounds funny, we're going to truly look at cybersecurity as a science, as a set of equations. And people that will build, if we're talking about space, will truly look at this at the fundamentals and be able to have a fully open and documented way of saying, hey, this is exactly how we think about how we're protecting this. This is how we're not protecting it. Here's how it works, right? It's like building bridges. There's equations. People will have that figured out and it will be open. It won't be the arcane knowledge, which is right now a lot in cybersecurity.
Right. Benjamin, do you have a non-consensus take?
So that's a tough question. I would say, I think, as a tech CEO running a scale-up, every time people are reaching out to me saying, well, you have to do, and 4 years ago, you have to do blockchain. Well, I have nothing to do with blockchain. I don't see how blockchain can be useful in my use case. Then, well, you have to do something about Web3 or the metaverse.
Yeah.
I don't think I have anything to do with blockchain or metaverse or Web3.
Right.
So we have all those trends, and people are pushing you into those trends because they want to have PR or they want to have visibility. And I've always pushed back saying, well, I don't believe we should, go on that trend. But on AI, I truly believe that it's currently changing the world in every single business, including cybersecurity, including fraud, including on both sides, defense and attack. So on that topic, I won't be able to say that I don't believe it's a huge trend. It is a huge trend. It's changed everything. And the companies that are not able to understand that and to assess that might be in trouble. And we can see Google, who 2 years ago could say that Google will be challenged on the search engine? Nobody. I mean, Google is Google, right? 2 years later, they are trying to catch up and they are not able to catch up.
Right.
That's incredible. So every business, even the largest one on the planet, are being challenged today.
Right. That's a fantastic point. Thank you. All right. Well, the floor is open for audience questions. Do we have? Oh, very enthusiastic audience question right there.
Yeah. Hello. My name is June. I work as a software engineer. Since the title of this panel is Security in Space, I wanted to ask more about security in space. So, based on your experience, what are some differences between best practices, cybersecurity best practices, that you would have in, let's say, a SaaS company versus like rockets or satellites or those kind of like space?
Day and night, complete day and night. The limitations of the space environment are multiple orders of magnitude stricter than what we have on Earth. And what it means is that you really, really have to take into account the types of attacks that people want to perform against you, right? I would sort of make the argument that today, probably the biggest, right, might be, hey, there's a conflict somewhere in the world, and one of the, let's call it top 3 nations, wants to take out the other satellite. In my mind, that's probably 50% of the threat landscape for satellites today, right? The reality is that there's a lot of different ways to do that, and I'm gonna talk a little bit jargon, but like a buffer overflow, right? Like some kind of classic exploit is not necessarily, like it's really not necessarily how it's going to go, right? There's so many other types of attacks. So if you're telling me, hey, like Starlink, the software package that gets sent up there does not account for somebody finding some kind of remote code execution in like the base station to the satellite, be like, you know what, that's probably okay, in the sense that if Russia tomorrow decides to like nuke a whole bunch of them, they're just going to do it. They're not going to need that remote code execution. If a hacker in their basement wants to go and try to get in, they're probably not going to have access to a base station with the type of power throughput that's necessary to go and do those types of attacks. So it's truly, that being said, last bit is, that's also going to change drastically over the next X years as we start to have data centers in orbit. When you start to have a data center in orbit and anybody can go and spin up an EC2 instance in orbit, right? That really changes the types of equation and again, the types of things that we have to protect against.
Thank you. Do we have another question? Go ahead.
So one question I have, I've noticed with a lot of like security vendors, the whole name of the game is tool consolidation. You want to have everything in one platform, right? There's the whole journey of you want to detect, there's companies that detect like, oh, we do the most detections, then prioritization, then remediation, and then the game, like how we have like LLMs and stuff to help like people who are not in a certain industry learn something. That I've noticed is there's a shift for developers or people from not a security background to protect their software. So what do you think the future of the average security practitioner will be if non-security practitioners can protect their infrastructure and have things automatically remediated?
Benjamin?
Yeah, sure. So I think we mentioned Copilot, and I saw a lot of great startup being able to, right at the moment you code a software, be able to suggest some improvement in the quality of the software you are currently writing. So you're right that we have tools now using AIs and LLMs, but not only, in order to, at the moment you write every single code of line to prevent SQL injection, the old SQL injections, or buffer overflow, or any weaknesses that you can introduce inside your code. So I think it will be a great tool, and at every stage, from the moment you develop the code, at the moment you put that in production, and the moment it's in production, at every stage of the CI/CD, you can introduce security checkup to make sure that you don't create weaknesses in production. And then when it's in production, you can have active security layers like what we do in order to make sure that no attackers can abuse that, not only detect, but block it in real time when it's live.
So I guess to quickly expand on that. My question is then, what's the role of the security practitioner, right? Gone are the days of the SOC where people are just innocent and like searching out stuff. Right now, developers can protect themselves. So what happens to the security person?
No, that's a good question, and I'm not really concerned by their ability to find a way to get more, to provide more value. And when we automate something in general, that's great time saver for this person to provide more value, to train developers, to train the infrastructure team, etc. So yeah, I'm pretty sure we will see more value getting from that.
That's fantastic. Last question for the night. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead. You can go ahead first. We'll squeeze you in too. Never mind.
I know we lightly touched on blockchain. My questions are two parts. So how do we all know traditionally blockchain is used for ransomware. So do you see blockchain getting into security? And ultimately, do you see somehow blockchain contributing to security in space as well?
Potentially controversial statement, but I think blockchain is an incredibly interesting technology that's really, really looking for a use case. I have yet to find a use case where, I really love the tech. That's not the question. It's a beautiful idea, beautiful concept. But I haven't hit a point where I can say, hey, in the real world, this provides me a very specific kind of value that people in the real world will value enough that they couldn't get out of a bank, a web server, and a Postgres database.
And I think Benjamin's already told us not all trends have to be jumped on. Last question?
Thank you so much for answering this. I run a blockchain company, so my question is, people say this will change in the next 10 years. But my question is, what will not change in the next 10 years? That we will focus on.
I will say the cat and mouse game with attackers. It will be different technologies, different attack vector, different approach, but at the end of the day, people will still try to attack companies, countries, because they will try to find an ally. So we will probably talk about different technologies, but it will always be attacker and defense.
Fantastic. Well, thank you every single person in this room for joining us, for extending your support tonight. Thank you to Maxime and Benjamin for your brilliance, your sincerity in answering all the questions, and for entertaining my stories and my narrative. And I want to make sure everyone has enough time to connect, to speak with each other. We have lots of beer, we have wine, we have snacks. We have the space for a little while, so please stick around, mingle, make some friends, and the biggest thank you goes out to Tony, wherever he is, for this space, the yard, for without which we would not be all gathered here today. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. That concludes.